Whether you are 20 or 50 years old, And She Thrived is here to offer you the space to express yourself. We aim to provide you with the tools and resources to enable you to overcome the challenges that often come with being divorced. And She Thrived aims to build community so that you might be more empowered to address the various aspects of your life, such as the self, work, community, and family life. We want to hear from you and we want to serve you. So if there's anything that you specifically would like us to address, please do let us know in the comments. Now, enjoy the next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, Jamil. Welcome back.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Pleasure to be here, Sumaya.
I am delighted that we are able to resume our conversation on nonviolent communication. So shall we continue where we left off last time?
Yes, please. Let's do it.
Okay, and I've got a question regarding connection. Is it correct to say that NVC can only be applied or used, or what is the word, with somebody with whom you seek a connection? Or is it possible to use this process to communicate, for example, with an ex or a child who has absolutely no desire to connect?
It's a good question, Sumaya, and I don't know if I have a clear-cut answer for you. However, because I don't actually use the language like can NVC be used, it's more of a way of being than it is a way of being of something that you use as a tool. However, it's possible to look at it.
Let me rather say like as a mode of expression, right? Can one pull up the whole observation, feelings, needs with somebody who's actually just not interested?
I think our religious experience and paradigm will help us understand your question. It's a wonderful question. And I think that if there's one party that wants to connect, then most certainly, if connection is important to one of them, then the one whom it's important for can utilize NVC in any type of circumstance, even when someone appears to be unwilling to go the path of connection. It doesn't require two people. It requires the person who wants to connect to make an effort to connect.
Okay, so say for example, I'm faced with so-and-so and he or she is just not feeling it and they just don't care. Could I then speak from my perspective as in, this is what I'm noticing, this is what I'm feeling, and I had this need to be met, and may I make a needs guess for what you are experiencing right now? Am I able to do that even though what if they say, what the hell is this? Are you like using all the babble on me? I'm not interested. And then, I'm saying, but am I able to say, then without putting the disclaimer, but saying, for example, like you are feeling that you are not being heard, or something like that. I don't know. I can't think of an example right now. Maybe.
Well, I would remind you from our last conversation that that's not a feeling, that's a thought. When you think you're not being heard. But however, and I'm not going to correct you on that. All I'm going to say is if NVC
sorry, let me retry that. Let me try that again. You are feeling frustrated because you have a need to be heard.
Absolutely. We all have that need. You recognize it. And then you recognize how it feels. So how it can be frustrating when you're not being heard. Some of the practitioners that I work with, they reduce all the universal needs. And I tend to agree with some of the trainers I've had who said this. They can reduce all the needs to 3. The need to be heard, as you said, the need to be seen, and the big one, the need to matter.
Absolutely, 100%.
These 3, you can amalgamate all the needs, and they come down to these rich needs. And also we have the existential needs, which are important to us as believers, the need for purpose, the need for meaning, etc. But in interpersonal connections and communications, what you're saying, let me just answer your question hyperbolically, and say, if NVC could not be utilized in an interaction that you just described, I would have no interest or use for it. No interest in it and no use for it. Why? Because I don't want it to require anything from anyone. Connection at any point. If I want to do it, I'm in choice. So the example you gave, or any example you think of, we're talking more about intimate relationships like father-son, mother-daughter, mother-son, spouses, ex-spouses, parents, etc. Connection's often important in those circumstances, but what if it's not? What if it's not? If you remember, those of the viewers who have read the book, recall the almost sexual assault rape situation in St. Louis, Missouri. That's in the book.
Yes.
Where the teacher empathizes with the would-be rapist. And the goal is to connect with what she observes in him, which is what? He's tremoring. He's fearful. He's shaking. He's worried. And yet he's making a threat to assault her person. She connects with him empathically. He accepts her offer, and she shares vulnerably, I'm very scared right now. I'm very fearful, and I really would love, the request comes, my need for safety is not met at all, and security, and I would love that you find a way to meet your needs and not hurt me at all. And what does he do? He's able to connect with her vulnerability and says, give me your damn purse then. She gladly throws the purse at him, and a rape is avoided. Alhamdulillah. You can connect with enemies if that's your intention. And why wouldn't it be? If your goal is peace, if your goal is coexistence, if your goal is much more than connection.
That really blew my mind, actually, because I just could not believe how a person who is threatened in such a severe way was able to not go into fight or flight mode and just, kick and scream or weep or whatever we would do in that terrible situation. And she could actually sit and, apply this process. I just found that fascinating.
Absolutely. That's the most moving of stories in the book, in my opinion, because it's such a frightening situation for a woman to be in, and she stayed with it. Now, you and I, we're also talking to, well, your viewers are Muslim women predominantly, let's say. And so we have a common objective criteria and common paradigm. This is exactly as my teacher would say, is when danger approaches, something like that situation in St. Louis school, immediately bring to mind God's name. And it really doesn't matter how or what you recite at that time, but the act of doing dhikr at that moment is like the act of being in a place of empathy and vulnerability and being able to articulate it. We actually, before that happens for us in the way of nonviolent communication, we'll first recite and we'll bring to mind God's name. Ya Hafidh, whatever name we call God by, whatever surah we recite, whatever salawat ala al-Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we recite, we're doing that first to say the ultimate source of connection is what we're doing. And then that's the vertical. Now I'm in this horizontally scary situation. It's frightening. And I'll start to use what I've learned. And that's where the two meet. In fact, it's very beautiful and refined because you know where the source of connection comes from. And you know the path to take spiritually for that, to bring some anxiety down and worry and fear, which she didn't even have to do, right? We would do that. Maybe you as a Muslim woman put in a situation like this, may God never allow that to happen. That's what you would do first. You might recite Al-Fatiha, you might recite Ayat al-Kursi, you might do Salat al-Munjiyah, something like that. And then you learn these kind of tools and processes to utilize in those kinds of situations, because NVC, for me, the tire meets the road exactly in those scary situations where violence can be averted, tragedies can be pushed aside. Ya Latif. We ask God to put gentleness in all the things that are written for us. And it's an amazing capacity to remain composed when it's understandable if you were completely in disarray, anxious, scared, fearful, running, screaming. What would have happened to that woman? Let's not even imagine. But just for a second, what would have happened to that woman if she said, you have no right to abuse me, no right to assault me and harm me. I'm not your woman. You cannot come and attack me like this. He's telling her, take off your clothes. He has no right. It's not about rights. The language of rights has no place in NVC. It has no place in NVC. This is about connection. And in this case, connection and empathy to save your life by God's grace.
So on the topic of empathy, is it true, correct me if I'm wrong, that in NVC, before I can be empathetic to somebody else, I have to have empathy for myself. I have to connect within myself and show self-empathy. Is that correct?
I'm not going to black and white it by saying correct or incorrect. However, I might change the language a little bit, Sumaya. For example, in that scenario that we gave that's in the book by Marshall Rosenberg, it's not necessarily a self-empathy that she does. It's a taste of it, but what we might call it is self-awareness or emotional recognition. Oh my God, this is what's happening right now. The heartbeat's going wild. Physical sensations. You do somatic inventory. What's happening? And then you're able to, at least in your mind, split second, name it, and now strategize. So our strategy first is the vertical paradigm, the vertical realm. Then we do what she may have done. Right. And she's one step away from using what we call the protective use of force, which is to cause bodily harm or death to someone in the interest of protecting life. It's very serious. It's not punishment, it's protection. And that's talked about in the book. In fact, I have a whole workshop on that I do with 2 martial arts instructors. And it's when communication is no longer possible. That's another topic on its own.
Okay.
Yes, I would agree that the self-empathy is not a prerequisite, but a kind of emotional recognition. Here's what's happening right now. This is heavy. And in split-second empathy, self-awareness, emotional recognition. You know, if you read Emotional Intelligence, Goleman, it's like emotional recognition precedes emotional processing. You can't tame what you don't name. So knowing what's happening, not judging it, not suppressing it, not pushing it aside. This is bad for me to be angry. It's bad for me to be sad right now. But just naming it in a neutral place.
Okay, I mean, with empathy, let's take an example that is not as frightening as that one. Say, for example, a person comes to you, a friend, a family member, and they are obviously seeking empathy. And what if you just don't feel like giving empathy? That's what I mean. Like,
absolutely, I love that question.
Right.
I love that question.
I mean, because you can't give what you don't have. So that's like, can you check in with yourself that, well, am I even in a position to do this right now?
Right. Beautiful question, Sumaya. Alhamdulillah. Lovely question. Empathy is always a choice. You can't compel someone to be empathic. You can't compel yourself to be empathic. And then you ask yourself, if someone has come to you, let's say your son, your daughter, your sister, your brother, your friend, someone's come to you, someone's come to me, and they want empathy. No one usually says, well, not no one, but many folks outside of NVC circles don't come and say, are you free? I'd like some empathy right now. It's usually that we have to guess that I sense that my son, my wife, my daughter, somebody is, they're asking for empathy in a roundabout way. And if we're right, then we have 2 choices. We can give it to them if we have some capacity, and this is a big and, willingness. Capacity and willingness to do so in the moment that they need it. If we can't for whatever reason, then the process is to ask ourselves, what needs to happen for me, empathically for myself, in order for me to be empathic to someone else. That doesn't need to be a long process. Sometimes, can I give our example?
Sure.
You know, you made a request / demand of me, and I didn't know how to process it. I had no clue about the why behind it, and I couldn't be in a place of empathy to understand what's behind this request. I sure want to honor it, but there's a part of me that wants to not honor this. And it's a part of it is just me being a disagreeable person. The other part is I really would love to know why. I'd like to know the need behind that. And so it requires a bit of processing. It's longer than what we have time for often. And then when you understand the rationale and reasoning behind it, there's such a new willingness to, I won't use the word comply, but to empathize, and it brings the fight right down. It brings the fight right down, like, I know what's alive for her. If only I could have done some empathic guessing. But at first, I want to know, first of all, why is there a rebelliousness in me to honor the
Resistance.
request?
Right.
Yeah, there's a resistance, and I want to rebel, like, no. And it's always no, no. And usually it means there's a disconnect somewhere. And when you can repair and reconnect without the energy of, hey, you have to do something. Samia, you have to do this. Jamil, you have to. We don't have to do anything. Life is a choice. You don't have to wear a seatbelt when you drive. You make that choice. You'll have to answer for the decisions you make, but you're in choice for everything. And this is a big deal in the last 3 years now. The issue of being in choice with what we do in terms of our health, etc. So this part's really important. Everything is a choice. When you give empathy, when you receive it, and it feels wonderful and warm to receive it, but it also feels that warm and wonderful to give it when it's from the heart, not by force, culture, norm, formula, protocol. So you see how NVC is not as nice as it sounds in the books and in the surface. It's actually quite a shockingly authentic way of connecting when connection is important.
And what I love what I've learned about empathy through NVC is just being able to say, for example, if we have to enter into a difficult situation, say, for example, there's a difficult family member and you have to go see them on Thanksgiving and you're feeling anxious about, okay, well, how is this going to go down? So to think about it before the time, give yourself empathy, and it's like putting yourself in an empathic bubble where whatever it is that you are needing, that that cannot be met by those people or that person that you are forced to be around. You kind of like give yourself like a full dose of meeting that need in some way. I don't know what it would look like exactly, whether it's just like talking yourself through it or imagining yourself in a beautiful place or saying kind, loving words to yourself. It's almost like kind of like equipping yourself with the ammunition.
Yes. Yes, I like the analogy. Yeah.
And so that you can go forth and whatever they say, it's not going to, I'm going to use the word stimulate, since I know that in NVC they don't like to use the word trigger, so that you're not as stimulated by the way that they might address you or ignore you.
Yeah.
You might be completely invisible. Yeah.
Two things. One, you can use trigger as much as you want. I love triggers. I love guns. And I'm an NVC practitioner. However, and also the first sentence when you were describing that situation, and how common is that situation, huh? Going to an Eid party, going to Thanksgiving it's such a common situation. But you used the language of, and you have to go to a family member's house. The need for autonomy sovereignty, choice, and freedom is huge. Not only for us as North Americans in a somewhat freedom-oriented environment, but everybody has those needs. So when we use language like this, I encourage people, I encourage my clients, I encourage my kids, myself to get out of the choiceless language of have to. You may have a lot of pressure to do so.
No, well,
But
what I mean, I'm going to interrupt you here because from a religious perspective, we have the concept of silatul rahim, right? So even if you don't really want to do something, for the sake of Allah, we maintain certain connections because there's barakah and there's ajr in that, right? Because they family
imagine,
members.
let me
When I say should, you know what that should is based in.
Yeah, I do. I do understand what you're saying, and I want to say something around that. The Popatia clan, my family, is more than 50 or 60 people out here in BC. The rest near you, Texas, California, etc. And I don't see them all that often. It's a choice. I'm invited to a lot of family gatherings. I make that choice because I value authenticity, freedom, autonomy, and taking into consideration what you said about the imperative of keeping connection with family. Absolutely. There's also the quality of the silat rahim. So the quality, you and I, as full-grown adults, we can discern. Even your 6-year-old son, my 10-year-old daughter, my teenage son, they will be able to discern and they will be able to see when we're disingenuous. So now when you go to a social pressure place and say, okay, I'm going to visit my cousin. It's Eid after all. I'm going to go, but I don't really enjoy his company, her company. I'm going to give it a try. Allah lillah, alhamdulillah, I'm going to do it for Allah's sake. You never know what will ensue after that. In fact, connection may ensue with such a beautiful intention because you're doing it for a higher purpose. This is clear in our faith. Also, recognizing that you can do that and it doesn't have to be all the time. So let's say you had a very heavy Eid holiday morning, heavy afternoon, difficulties with spouse, children, etc., a million phone calls, and you're tired, you're exhausted, maybe you're not feeling well, and then you still social pressure yourself to do that, and yet you're unsure of how you're going to respond to the slightest stimulus from this not so congenial cousin, let's say. Okay, so you put yourself at risk when you do the have to. I'm not saying don't do it or do it. I wouldn't talk like that. But I'm saying that when you do something, even if you pressure yourself, convincing yourself that you're doing it by choice is a very different thing than saying, I have to do this. I want to do this. The example Marshall Rosenberg gives, and it's a familiar example that you and I are aware of. Israeli soldier pulls aside a young man on the streets of Jerusalem, a young man. He's got his gun pointing towards a young Palestinian and says, take off all your clothes. There's a gun. You're hiding a gun in your jacket. Take off all your clothes or I'm going to shoot you. This is on the streets of Jerusalem. The young man, Marshall Rosenberg says, the young man now has a choice. And of course, the audience in this workshop was said, what kind of choice does he have? He has to strip or he's going to be shot dead. And Marshall Rosenberg at this time requests patience from the audience and participants. And he says, look, he's in choice at the moment. He's in full choice. And then he explains the situation. The young man said, I don't have a gun. You know I don't have a gun. He said, take off all your clothes before I shoot you. He said, you'll have to shoot me because I'm not taking off my clothes. Check anywhere you want on me. I have no gun. What does the Israeli soldier do? He does check everywhere, fully clothed, checks everything, realizes he doesn't have a gun, and sets him free. And then the crowd, the participants were shocked, like, he took such a risk. He took such a serious risk of his life And Marshall said, I said he had a choice on what he wanted, what he could do. I didn't say it was an easy choice. They're rarely easy choices. Look, I mean, how many times can we think of people who made some very, very difficult decisions in the last 3 years, right? With heavy consequences. It's just everywhere we see it. And when I remind myself, when I feel pressure, even religious pressure, I remind myself I'm in choice. I'm in choice to surrender to God. I can rebel. And what a disastrous, tragic path that would be. This is why I think Rosenberg, he named violence, and we can expand the definition of violence. Violence is a tragic expression of unmet needs. What a beautiful way to put it. It's not condemning the perpetrator of violence. It's not praising the perpetrator of violence either, but it's putting it as, hey, look, somebody's needs are not met, or a group of people's needs are not met. And look what they're resorting to. What a horrible strategy. That's a judgment, no doubt, because there's so much pain, anguish, killing, murder, etc. It could be war, right? And while in our tradition, war in and of itself is not tragic, the reasons that men go to war is very tragic sometimes. So I hope that answers your question. It was a little bit of a long answer, to me. I apologize.
It does, but you did jump to my later on question, which is exactly about the mistreatment and oppression, because I know that from what I've learned in NVC, they do not favor the kind of language of victim and oppressor, perpetrator, that type of thing, because as you say, that all of these uncomfortable, painful, violent scenarios that ensue are all due to, as you say, a tragic expression of unmet needs.
Yes.
Is there anything else you want to mention about that specifically before we move?
Yeah, with regards to the dichotomies that you mentioned of victim, victimizer, oppressed, oppressor, I want to state that it's not to say that there's no oppression, that there's no victimization. Clearly, the world is full of that. However, it cements the disconnect when we get into the language and realm of correcting people moralistically. And that's what the victim, victimizer, oppressor, oppressed paradigm does. It attempts, and hopelessly, to shame the would-be, the apparent or alleged oppressor or victimizer, to act straight and to behave properly. How often do you have experience with that working? I have tried to shame my own children into behaving straight. I have done that as a coach in sports. I have done that as a teacher. I've done that as a spouse. I can't think of a time ever when it's actually worked. Can you?
No, not at all.
In other words,
frustration, and the person obliges, it's due to force. It's just, and it also creates severance, not connection whatsoever.
Right. So this is why, and your viewers may or may not be slightly stimulated by such statements and declarations, but I don't care much for the social justice movements of today in the world. Why? Because that's what they are. Whether it be something to do with race, gender, religion, culture, etc. It's a Marxist type of conflict perspective. There are wrongdoers and right doers. And the wrongdoers want the right doers want the wrongdoers to behave straight, properly. Good luck in telling people, stop harming us, you suck, you're horrible, you're this, you're that. It's a great way to get more animosity between people. I have distanced myself from my children at times because of being so obsessed with fixing their behavior, fixing their words, fixing their everything. And what happens? A growing distance. So I'd like to name that just because I do this work and I've studied it and immersed in it, it doesn't mean that I don't also struggle with these things. I do tremendously.
Okay, so this was definitely going to be one of the things I want to talk about and model at some point later, because children are a huge thing. You've just mentioned children, so this might actually be the perfect time to talk about it, though, is that how do we then stop this distance that we as parents can so much be, responsible for in our relationships in our family life?
I think this is really where the religion, the way of Islam, surrender, meets NVC in a very beautiful place. And you alluded to it last time we talked, Sumaya, about the topic of detachment from outcome.
Mm-hmm.
We're very fierce with our children when we want a certain outcome. And we even know what strategy to employ to get the outcome we want. For someone else, mind you. And so we stay attached to the strategy because we're attached to the outcome. And if I recall, one of the best things I ever heard in early 2020 from Dr. Christiana Northrup in the state of Maine, I believe, when the world was staying home. And she was encouraging her listeners, her viewers, to let go, let God. Let go, let God. That will resonate with people of faith who have a paradigm of letting go, knowing full well that the person whose attachment to outcome that you want, your child, your son, your daughter, even a spouse or someone as an adult, you, them, and all of us, we're in good hands, capital H. There's nothing to worry about. But the process is incredibly important because they may come to the outcome you want in a way you didn't even imagine, through a path you couldn't have conceived. That's where the beauty is, because it's a detachment. They have to get there. I want them to get there. They may get there, but you can't draw out that strategy completely step by step. And if you're attached to it, you'll be very attached to the strategy and the outcome. And yet you might get, as you said last time, resistance. People resist when they feel a sense of compulsion. How many, and you and I both know these kind of folks, how many budding zealots do we know, young men and women who love to, and out of a love of God and love of the Prophet Muhammad, that they go and, zealously teach people about the religion of Islam, teach people about the way of surrender, the Quran, etc., the Sirat. And yet, there might not be too much weight given to how they do that. The goal, what's the goal? Teach them about the religion. They will come to a place of acceptance to it. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But to use Christian theological terms, don't have delusions of grandeur, that all the outcomes are in your hands. They're not. Every day, people like you and I, we hope and we pray that our children stay straight, so to speak. And we do our best to ensure that, knowing fully well that they might not. They might not. And so NVC is a type of path to help with the acceptance of that and begin the processing of, here's what I'd love. Here's what I'm noticing. Here's what I'm worried about. Here's a request to your kids, for example. And then leave it to them. Then leave it to them. And that's hard. That's very hard, because what is it? It entails letting go. I don't know too many parents who are good at letting go. My own parents are horrible at that. And I paid the price for that, so to speak. So.
Okay, so I'm assuming that the kind of things that you are talking about seems to affect more older children. For example, I would rather you do not associate with X or Y person who might be a bad influence on you, right? Is that an example that we could look at?
I wouldn't, so even the way you've just languaged it is something I would adjust a little bit and say, you know, I worry about the time you spend with so-and-so, because what I have observed about so-and-so is that she does this or doesn't do this, says it in this. And I'm worried that that might impact you and the way you live your life and the way you carry yourself. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just sharing that I'm worried about this. And so I guess my request would be, can you be cautious around this particular friend? Or if necessary, even not be a close friend of this person's? What do you think of that?
Do you mention your need as a parent? Like,
absolutely. If you can name it, it's better.
What would that need be? Because what is that need? It's a need for a righteous child. You know, that's
yeah. So what's the need behind the righteous child?
What is the need behind a righteous child?
Yeah. Like that's what we would call sabab. That's a righteous child is something that will lead to something else.
I want you to be safe.
Even that could be part of it.
Just being righteous means that you are guarded from wrath and you have God's love and mercy.
Right. So there you just, Ridwanullah is, we all want that.
Yeah.
That is the biggest need for the believer. Right now, so you're taking this NVC, you're learning it, I'm learning it, I'm facilitating it, but I have in the back of my mind, I also have a very spiritual paradigm that says, wait a sec, you're never going to find any online list of NVC needs that says Ridwanullah, the ultimate need. You're not going to find that. You've got to know that. And you've got to, well, I won't say you've got to, I'm sounding like a coach because we're close, but what I'm inviting you to is to tap into that knowledge that you already have and that experiential awareness of the ma'iyah, the closeness of God to you at all the time. And that will actually inform so much of your NVC. In my opinion, it won't require a whole lot of intellectual rigor and hard work, because you have something that's sweet, easy, soft as your core foundation, which is what? You're doing this for God's sake. Even your connection with other people is for God's sake.
So then could one say that, I mean, I do not, alhamdulillah, have teenage children yet, but could you say that I am concerned because I have a need for the pleasure of God upon you? Is that a need? Can I say that?
What's if you look at a lot of the needs lists, how would you put that in one word? I mean, Ridwanullah is absolutely a reality. But what do you bring it back to? If I look at, and I tend to use them a lot, so they're mostly memorized for me, the one-word lists of universal needs, when you're saying this, Sumaya, what comes to mind for me is purpose.
Purpose, right. But then that's not for me, though. It's for my progeny. I want you to have meaning in your life. I want you to have purpose. Can I extend that to my child?
You can extend it knowing full well it's not in your hand. All you can extend is the desire for it for your child.
Okay, because this is interesting, because whenever I've looked at the feelings and needs list, it's always pertaining to oneself.
Yes, that's where we start. You're right.
Can it be for somebody else that you love?
Absolutely. And especially when they can't name it for themselves. This is where the teaching happens, that you as a mother, myself as a father, what's the most important thing we teach our children? I think this doesn't come from our books of fiqh or the book. I think it just comes naturally when any kid asks, and my daughter always asks, Papa, what are we here for? We know, you and I know the ayah. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. We're here to know our Lord, to worship our Lord, and to die in a good state when we meet our Lord. And everything else is superfluous to that. In fact, it contributes to that or takes away from that. Then your kids or your friends or your family members, they don't have to be children to understand this. They can relax and surrender and say, whew, because at school they told us the purpose of our life is to find a fulfilling career.
To be happy.
And
To
be happy.
To fulfill your
This is the most trivial of
right
pursuits.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Happiness is nowhere on the language of NVC at all. You might find joy, etc., and feelings and needs too, because who does not have the need to have some joyful moments? But for the believer in embarking on NVC, the need for joy does not trump the need for meaning, purpose, spiritual excellence. Then joy follows as a side effect to that. And that's exactly, if you've read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, he actually says, as soon as you make happiness a goal, you will fail to achieve it. In the first 10, 20 pages, this is what he says. It's like, if you pursue happiness, be sure you won't get it. Because the pursuit of fleeting, trivial, worldly pleasures will catch up to you, and you'll need more and more just to have that little dopamine kick, and then you're empty. Then you need more, and then you're empty. Instead, if it's more solidified and more, you might say, constant, because your sense of purpose and meaning is very strong, and every day you go to sleep, it doesn't, for you to meet your need for meaning and purpose requires no one, as opposed to your need for connection with human beings, your son, for example. That requires your son to meet your need for connection. But in NVC, the way I teach it, there are 3 realms of connection. Connection with yourself, connection with others, family members, etc., friends, whoever, enemies even. And then these 2 are dependent on what? For us, connection with one's creator. Creation, creator, and your own self. Now that is a recipe for a lot of times needs being met without anyone having to do anything for you. In other words, you're in good hands. Capital H. Alhamdulillah, shukrillah.
Okay, let's come with a very, very simple, straightforward example here. Let's look at a younger child, such as my child who, when I talk to him, I give him an instruction or I just address him. It's like he's not even listening. It drives me absolutely bonkers. Okay.
What's your attachment?
Feel very, very stimulated. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I become like Cruella de Vil. Okay. Because I'm just very annoyed and irritated that, are you not listening to me? And then I'm thinking to myself, this is totally not NVC. I can feel myself becoming aggressive. How would I talk to a child, a young child, who literally just like has checked out and just doesn't respond, What are we the way?
It's a difficult situation. And it reminds me of the beautiful prophetic tradition. خير الأمور أوسطها. The best of affairs is in the middle area. The best of affairs is the moderate affair, the moderate path. In this case, your child, again, we remember the beautiful saying in our tradition, دَاعِبُهُمْ سَبْعَةً, play with your children for the first 7. If your child is under 7, the preponderance of his or her life should be play. So the little bits of instruction that we give our kids before 7 is followed by double, triple, quadruple the amount of play. So they're full, they're filled, they're throwing mud at you outside in your yard. So they're playing, they're fighting with, if they have siblings, etc. They're playing with their toys, and they're learning the world, about the world. How do you acknowledge that you're upset? Well, son, I noticed that you don't seem to be too interested in doing this exercise right now in mathematics, or I'm guessing that you're a little bit feeling antsy right now or excited, and you'd like to play for some time maybe, or be distracted with something outside. And they might not say, yeah, mom, you guessed my feelings correctly. Now guess the needs. They're not going to talk to you like that, but you'll know when you hit the mark there, you'll know And from their actions around you, you'll know, all right, I think you don't have to say it, but you could. Son, I noticed that you really feel like playing right now. Your need for play that's it. You've reached your limit right now for studies, and you want to head outside and play or kick the ball around. And you'd like it if I perhaps would just put the books away for a few minutes, or even your cereal or your oatmeal, whatever it is, because you just would like to have a few minutes of play. Hey, and then the request. I'm wondering if we go outside for a few minutes, if we can come back and finish the lesson that we had planned for today. Once we have some time outside, get some vitamin D on us and some sunshine, if you have sunshine where you live, play a little bit, get the blood flow in your body, somatic experience outside, if you can outside. Can we come back to this?
And what if he says no?
I was just going to say, thank you, Samantha.
Because he can't stand his Quran classes, and it's always this thing, oh, I hate Quran. And then I get stimulated because he'll say things like, it's a waste of time. So if I say
it's hard to hear that.
Right. You have a need right now after school to relax, to play. Shall we do something fun? And then can we try and but actually, how is that going to work? Because Quran is at a certain set lesson. I can't change the time for his Quran dars. Do you know what I mean?
It depends whether you're the teacher or not, this is where a bit of bargaining can actually work well. Like, you know what? And admit your limits. Hey, look, we've hired so-and-so Fulan. He's going to come and teach Quran at this time. That he's coming at this time. And I know that right now you'd rather play basketball. I can't last minute ask him to change because I want to be respectful to our friend, the teacher. And you understand because you like when I respect your time, and you understand about respect. Do you understand the meaning of respect, etc.? And you go through that language with him and say, I know it's not ideal right now, but I'd like it if we can actually give some time to it. And even if there's a bit of rebellion, you might say, I get that it's not ideal, but would you be willing? And first thing I learned in NVC is they continuously, all these practitioners sound like robots. Would you be willing to? Would you be willing to? And I got so annoyed with that. I said, why do y'all talk like that? Why do you say, would you be willing just ask? And they said, Jamil, we're reminding ourselves and the person or people we're speaking to that they're in choice.
But the child is not in choice because Quran lesson is going to happen whether you like it or not.
Okay, so just understand, you can do that. And that's compulsion. You can do that and know that it may be, as Ibn Khaldun writes about in his Muqaddimah, that the child may actually begin to resent the Quran. And, it doesn't take too much psychology to understand that they will connect resentment, bitterness with compliance to the Quran. So yes, you can compel in that. At some point, depending on the nature of your child, that child will eventually come to the place of, no, I won't. What are you going to do? Or, okay, I will, but oh, how I hate you inside.
Okay, so then
whatever you teach and you put on me, I'm going to hate that too. And so now the hatred of, God protect us, the hatred of the Quran is now on our shoulders. So you may that's what I meant by attachment to outcome. I started with, just to tell you, Sumaya, I started with my son Quran at around 5 or 6. By 7.5, 8, it was gone, stopped completely. There was nothing left in him that says, I want to do it. When did I start? Last year, age 12, I'm back at it only once a week for literally half a day. But I said, I'm not going to do this until you come to me. This is your responsibility. And I'm moralistic about it. Kitabullah is not a small thing. If you want to learn it, I can teach you. If you want to understand, I can teach you. If you want to memorize, I can do it with you. But you come to me. That way, I know that you're coming to me by choice and not because someone's forcing you or I'm forcing you. And that's what happened. So my attachment was, by 5, he starts. By 12, he's maybe memorized the Quran. 13. Here's the attachment. I have a son who's a memorizer, Hafidh al-Quran. And the strategy, drill him every day with Quran and push it so much so that that's what happens. The result, it's as though God's saying, you have no say. I decide when he's ready. Since he's Abdullah still. And it's put on me, and I detach from the outcome. So now I'm starting at age 13. He's in age 13, doing the last juz of the Quran. Whereas many of his friends are doing much more than that. Some have even finished memorizing. I'm not comparing. I don't care. That's not the point. For me, it's an inner process. If all he does in his prayers is Qul Huwallahu Ahad, and he's sincere, I'm okay with that. It wasn't my outcome that I had planned. And sometimes it's this is where NVC gets really it's really, for me, I think the detachment from outcome is detachment from strategy. So for us in Deen, we detach from the outcome because it's in Allah's hands. In NVC, we detach from strategy because the outcome is also outside of our hands, but the strategy, we can have a plethora of strategies in order to meet a need. And there are so many ways to meet needs. I hope that makes sense to me, because it's not a black and white advice that I could offer you or your viewers or myself. As you go, you get to see the nature of your child, the nature of your viewers' children, the children that they have, or stepchildren, etc., who they raise, younger siblings perhaps, and then take it from there. Take what they give you. Because if you look at the child as an autonomous individual, you can't force them. If I say to you, Sumaya, I'd like to force you to do a few things, and say a few things, and be a few things. You know, you're a mature woman, you're going to say to me, you're going to tell me what to do? Are you kidding me? Yes, Sumaya, because I care about you and I want good for you. And I'm going to tell you how to get there. You will say, I love your intention. Thank you very much, but no thanks. I mean, you might accept it from me. Who knows? If I'm lucky, you'll say, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Otherwise, I'll say, hey, she's going to get where she's going to get. She's going to create her own path. That can't be so different for a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, because they also are going to start showing you their needs without saying it. So a kid who says, I'm not studying right now, what they're saying is, I want choice. And I feel frustrated when I don't have it. And when they say, I don't want to do soccer anymore, as my son said with basketball, I don't want to play. I don't want to do it anymore. He's telling me I want choice, freedom, and autonomy to decide. If I value needs and I value individual autonomy, I'm going to have to respect that, even if it's bitter, even if it stings. Mm-hmm.
May I bring up an example that concerns, for example, an ex-spouse, since we do have to deal with ex-spouses? So say, for example, a generic example is, say the dad is supposed to come pick up the child at a certain time, and he is late, or he just cancels. The child is disappointed or devastated, either one of the scenarios, and I have to address, you have to address this ex-spouse, okay, who's like really key, right?
Let's role play it. Would you like to do that, Samaya?
Okay, yeah, sure, let's give it a go.
So and then you're in conversation with me. I'm more than half an hour late to pick up the child. You've called me. Yeah, hello, assalamu alaikum. What is it?
Wait, so you showed up or you did not show up?
I'm on my way, but I'm terribly late.
Okay, I'm seething. Okay, so I'm
yes, you're understandably. Yeah.
So, okay, so I'm going to say that you said that you were going to be at 10 o'clock. It is now 1 p.m. I am feeling very upset and angry right now. I have a need for, is having a need for routine? Is that a need?
Structure, of course.
Yeah,
structure, yeah, routine,
I have a need for structure.
Yeah.
I have a need for, is reliability? No, because that's
of course.
But that involves another party, though.
Well, you'd like predictability.
Predictability. Okay.
Yeah,
So
in the way of interacting with someone. Yeah.
but when I say like, I need to know that the person I'm dealing with is reliable, is dependable. You see, that involves another
Yeah.
human.
So what are you asking for? You're asking for integrity.
Integrity. Okay. Yes.
You're asking for
So I have a
integrity.
need for structure, for integrity.
Yes.
And on top of that, also I have a need for a happy child. Like I've got to deal with this.
Yeah. So I'm going to interrupt you there.
Yeah.
You don't get to decide the need, like such a thing for a happy child. I don't know a parent on God's green earth that
Okay, wait.
I would like a
No,
sad child.
let me rephrase that. I have a need that my child is dealt with with integrity. That's what I have it for.
Because I want that he can have trust.
That he
dependability.
Exactly. If he is
Dependability.
told something, then it is seen, it is followed through.
So like, let's be realistic. I'm gonna play the role. Yeah, something came up and I'm late. I know I'm late. Just deal with it. Things happen. Okay, so more stimulus. So now are you gonna stay in character or are you gonna boil?
Okay.
Yeah, things happen. What's the problem? I'm coming, aren't I? And he knows I'm gonna be late. I told you that. Yes, I know it's quite late, but things happen. And it's not a big deal. Get over it. Yeah. How do you stay in character?
Then
Yeah.
what do I say then? What do I say then? Okay. Do I make a request? Do I make a
What's he
request?
ask? When someone says that, when the man
so
is
I can
telling you
connect
that,
with his need. So
yes,
he has a need, I suppose, for some understanding, right? He has a need for understanding.
Yes.
He has a need for, I don't
And
know.
how might he be feeling?
Because I'm thinking that's so freaking irresponsible.
See,
Okay.
and all
So
that comes
selfish.
in.
So
All
selfish.
that
That's all the
exactly.
jackal talk.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Now you've created an enemy image of this man.
I have
And
indeed.
how can you possibly connect with him if he's already your enemy? You
Mhm.
can't.
No.
So when you can start, it's not to make excuses for behavior. It's just to say, shoot, I wonder, how's he feeling right now? Probably guilty as ever. Probably ashamed the fact that he's 2.5 hours late. And I'm sure something like, because we have a good we have a good opinion of the servants of God, even if they screw up, apparently. Therefore, yeah, even though I can't stand this behavior, I imagine something must have come up that was reasonably big, such that he's feeling so frustrated, guilty, ashamed of his behavior. After all, he's a man, he wants to have integrity, but he's so far from it right now. Let the thoughts come. And you can also come up with a lot of curse words at first. Don't suppress them. Let them come. Don't express them, but let them come. And then, oh man, I can imagine what he must be feeling right now, rushing on the highway or on a plane or however, on a train, however he's coming to do the pickup. And then you might guess at his needs that he might have. And will that lower the anger for you? Not right away. And you're a spiritual person. Let's just say you are, with husnudhan for you. If you are, then you'll have magnanimity in how you interact with people who do you wrong. Because, and I say do you wrong intentionally, because have you gone 24 hours in a day when you're not in some sort of khalwa retreat? Have you gone 24 hours with someone not doing you wrong? I have not. I have not. Those days may be a few, far, and they're very few. And how do you deal with that? If their impact is so powerful on you, it's going to have a negative impact on your health, your soul, your mind, because you can't just brush it off. Oh, look at this person. They said they were going to be here at 7 and it's now 8:30. Kind of like I'm going to be late right now. But it's okay. Like if you have magnanimity and a magnanimous character of your magnanimous soul, somehow in Allah's wisdom, it comes back to you. And you can figure out the needs for them. That's a secular way of looking at it, feelings and needs.
So
I like it.
Need be? What would his need be? You have what would his need be? I am having
what could it be?
Now
What
thinking,
could it be? What could it be? Imagine we have no clue what was the situation that led to being 3 hours late in a time where
Okay,
he's not supposed
so
to.
maybe his need is for me to have a husn al-dhan.
Okay, that's separate. But
Okay,
a situation may have arisen such that he's 3 hours late,
okay.
and maybe now his need might be for some understanding, support, transparency, and maybe it's a shameful thing to even tell you why he's late. Maybe it's actually not what you would consider a legitimate reason, and so you may finger point and say, that's your valid reason, you think? That's not the point. The point is it's happening. He's dreadfully late. And you have two options. You can moralize, shame, send him to that dreadful corner of guilt and shame. That's an option for you. And see if that brings more connection as a co-parent. See if that will have consequences to the way he interacts then with your son, who the reason he's coming to you in the first place. It's not for you. It's not even in there might not be any care for your structure, your need for scheduling, timing, integrity. He may not give about that. So he'll come and he's late, and he's there for his precious connection that he has between you and him. And you can change the energy of your interaction with him if you're not out to find fault with him.
So what should I say? Something like, I am sure that you have a need to connect with our son, and that you are frustrated that you are running late. Is that something that one could
you know why it's hard for you right now, Sumaya? You know why it's hard? Because you cannot bring yourself out of the enemy image.
It just sounds to me like a rehearsal, like it just.
Yeah, no, by the way, we have something called street NVC, which is a little more friendly than this. This is not a natural way to talk. So when you do it, it's like, hey, all right, yeah, you're on your way. You do know that I have other things planned for the day, and now those things are completely gone. My plans can't function anymore like this. I guess you must have something that came up that's quite serious that caused you to be 3 hours late, etc. Anyway, it's important for you to connect with your son, and it's important to me that you connect with your son. And so, I don't want to hear it right now. I know you must be rushed right now, but maybe you can explain things to me, because I'd like clarity.
Yes, because I have a need for schedule.
Yeah, you talk about your own needs.
Right.
Talk about your own. I got a need for clarity, understanding, and I'd like transparency about why this is happening. Yeah, that's how you might go at it. And
okay,
it's not formulaic, dear Sumaya. It's not formulaic at all. I'd like you, your viewers, listeners, all of our friends and family to understand that this is a process that is anything but linear and structured in a progressive sense like that. It's very in the moment. And once you can carry yourself in a way that is the spirit of nonviolent communication, which I think is within line of our tradition of Islam.
Absolutely.
And then when they meet beautifully. I'm not, by the way, saying I'm an exemplar of this, but I'm trying somewhat hard. And alhamdulillah, it's a work in progress, and may it be so, and may it benefit you and I and all your listeners, inshallah. And
thank you so much. I do know that you have to run, even though I feel that we've actually just barely gotten started. So to be continued, I suppose. But I do hope that everyone has taken something from this. I certainly have. And I wish you all the best, and hopefully we can reconnect, inshallah.
Thank you, Sumaya. It was a pleasure to connect with you, and we'll be in touch.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.